From the moment I met Jake, my husband's best friend, I felt a strange tension. Jake had been with Liam through everything, the ups, the downs, the years of bad breakups, and the wild parties. Their bond was undeniable. But from the first time I was introduced to Jake, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was less than thrilled about my presence in Liam's life. At first, I brushed it off as jealousy, a typical reaction when someone new enters a tight friendship. But as time went on, the unsettling tension between Jake and me grew deeper, more toxic. I never expected what would happen next, that Jake would attempt to tear our marriage apart, nearly succeeding in the most destructive way possible. Liam and I had a whirlwind romance. We met at a work event, and from the very first conversation, we clicked. He was charming, ambitious, and so attentive. A few months later, we were inseparable, planning our future together. I didn't meet Jake until about 6 months into our relationship, and that's when things began to unravel. Liam had always mentioned Jake, talking about him with such affection and admiration. To Liam, Jake was the brother he never had. But Jake didn't see me as the woman Liam loved. Instead, I was an outsider threatening his bond with Liam. It was subtle at first, passive-aggressive comments, inside jokes that clearly excluded me, and little digs at my personality, always hidden under the guise of humor. Liam would laugh them off, but I could see the veiled disdain in Jake's eyes. It wasn't long before I started feeling like the third wheel whenever Jake was around. "Are you sure she's the one?" Jake would ask Liam whenever they thought I wasn't listening. It wasn't an innocent question either. It was always loaded, meant to plant seeds of doubt. "You know, some people change after marriage. You just have to be sure, man." Liam would always brush off the comments with a chuckle, but I couldn't shake the growing resentment that was building between Jake and me. I brought it up to Liam once, hoping he'd see my side of things. "Jake's just protective," Liam said, smiling. "He's always been like that with the people he cares about." That conversation went nowhere. I tried to let it go, but Jake's actions were starting to poison my mind. Every time we were together, I felt his eyes on me, scrutinizing my every move, waiting for me to make a mistake that would prove to Liam that I wasn't good enough. Then things started getting worse. Jake began showing up at our house unannounced, always needing to talk to Liam about something. These conversations, however, conveniently never happened when I was around. It was like he was plotting something in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, after an unusually long conversation between the two of them, I decided to confront Liam. "I can't take this anymore, Liam. Every time Jake is here, it's like I'm invisible." "What is he saying to you?" I asked, my frustration boiling over. Liam sighed, rubbing his temples. "He's just worried about me. He thinks we rushed into this marriage. He's worried we didn't take enough time to get to know each other." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jake was planting doubts in Liam's mind, the very thing I had feared. "But you know that's not true, right?" I asked, my voice trembling. "We've built something real, something solid. How can you let him come between us like this?" Liam looked at me, his eyes full of conflict. "I don't know, Jess. I love you, but Jake has been with me through everything. I can't just ignore his concerns." It was like a dagger to the heart. Liam was my husband, the man I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with, and yet here he was, allowing his best friend to poison our marriage. From that point on, things started to spiral. Jake's influence over Liam grew stronger, and I could feel the distance between us growing. Every little argument we had, Jake seemed to be there, fueling the fire. He'd tell Liam that I was too controlling, too emotional, and not the right fit for him. And worst of all, Liam was starting to believe him. One day, I came home to find Liam packing a bag. "What are you doing?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. "I think we need some space, Jess," he said, not meeting my eyes. Jake thinks. "Jake thinks?" I interrupted, my voice full of fury. "Jake has been trying to sabotage our marriage from the beginning. And you're just going to let him?" Liam looked torn, but the damage had already been done. "I don't know what to think anymore. I need some time to figure things out." I couldn't believe it. Jake had finally gotten what he wanted. Liam was leaving me, and it was all because of him. I watched as Liam walked out the door, my heart shattering into a million pieces. For the next few weeks, I was a wreck. Liam and I barely spoke, and when we did, it was cold and distant. I knew Jake was behind it all, but I didn't know how to prove it. Then, one night, everything came to a head. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone when a message popped up from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of a conversation between Jake and Liam. My heart raced as I read through the messages. Jake had been feeding Liam lies, telling him that I had been unfaithful, that I was only with him for his money, and that I was planning to leave him once I got what I wanted. It was all lies, and I had no idea where Jake had even come up with these stories. But the worst part was that Liam believed him. I felt sick to my stomach. This was it. Jake's plan to destroy my marriage was finally out in the open, and now I had the proof I needed. But what was I going to do with it? The next day, I confronted Liam. I showed him the messages, my hands shaking as I handed him my phone. "Is this what you've been basing your decisions on?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Liam's face went pale as he read through the messages. "I didn't know. I didn't realize. You let him come between us," I said, tears streaming down my face. "You let him ruin our marriage with his lies." Liam looked up at me, his eyes full of regret. "I'm so sorry, Jess. I didn't know." But it was too late. The damage had already been done. Our marriage had been ripped apart by lies and manipulation, and I didn't know if we could ever fix it. Liam tried to apologize, tried to make things right, but the trust was gone. I couldn't look at him the same way, knowing that he had doubted me, knowing that he had let Jake's poison seep into our relationship. In the end, we decided to go to couples counseling, hoping to salvage what was left of our marriage. It wasn't easy, but slowly, we began to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. But things were never quite the same between us. The shadow of Jake's betrayal always lingered, a constant reminder of how fragile our relationship had been. As for Jake, Liam cut ties with him completely. Once Liam realized the extent of Jake's lies, he couldn't forgive him. Their friendship, once unbreakable, was now irreparably damaged. And while I was glad to be rid of Jake, I couldn't help but feel a sense of loss for what could have been. Our marriage survived, but just barely. And every day, I'm reminded of how close we came to losing everything, all because of the man we thought was Liam's best friend. Our counseling sessions were difficult but necessary. We talked about everything: our communication issues, the role Jake played in our marriage, and the deep-seated insecurities we both carried. The therapist helped Liam understand how his reliance on Jake's opinion had clouded his judgment, and how he had allowed an outside influence to poison our bond. For me, the sessions were about processing my anger and hurt and figuring out if I could ever fully forgive Liam. One session, in particular, stood out. It was the day we finally addressed the core of the problem: Liam's blind loyalty to Jake. "I always saw Jake as the one person who had my back," Liam explained during the session, his voice thick with emotion. "I've been through some really rough times, and he was always there. I guess I felt like I owed him something. Like, no matter what, he had my best interest at heart. But I see now that it was more about control for him. He didn't want to lose me to anyone, not even you, Jess." The therapist nodded, turning to me. "How does that make you feel, Jess?" I took a deep breath before answering. "It's hard to hear that Liam prioritized Jake over me. I've always known their friendship was important, but I never thought it would come at the expense of our marriage. I feel betrayed. Not just by Jake, but by Liam too." Liam looked down, shame written all over his face. "I'm so sorry, Jess. I never meant to make you feel like that." "I know," I said quietly. "But the damage is done," the therapist interjected, guiding us back to a place of understanding. "The good news is that you're both here, willing to work through this. The fact that you're talking about these things openly is a big step toward healing. But it's going to take time." As the weeks turned into months, things between Liam and me slowly began to improve. The walls between us started to come down, brick by brick. I was learning to trust him again, though it wasn't easy. Liam, for his part, was doing everything he could to prove that he was committed to our marriage. He became more transparent, more communicative, and more attentive to my feelings. But the shadow of Jake still loomed large in our lives. Even though Liam had cut ties with him, the damage he caused was still fresh. Sometimes, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, haunted by the thought of how close I came to losing everything because of one person's selfishness. Then, one day, I received an unexpected message from Jake. "I'm sorry," the text read. "I never meant to hurt you or Liam. I just didn't want to lose my best friend." I stared at the message for a long time, anger bubbling up inside me. After everything he had done, how could he think a simple apology would make things right? My first instinct was to ignore him, but after a few moments, I realized I needed closure. I typed back a quick response. "You nearly destroyed my marriage, Jake. I don't forgive you, but I hope you learned from this." That was the last time I ever heard from him. And as much as I wanted to leave the past behind, the scars he left on my marriage remained. Over the next year, Liam and I continued to rebuild. It wasn't a linear process. There were setbacks, moments of doubt, and nights where I questioned if we could ever truly move past what had happened. But we were committed to each other, and that commitment saw us through the toughest times. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Liam took my hand in his and said something that stuck with me. "You know, Jess, I've realized something through all of this. I was so focused on Jake's loyalty that I forgot to appreciate yours. You stood by me when most people would have walked away. You fought for our marriage even when I was too blind to see what was happening. I don't deserve you, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the husband you deserve." His words brought tears to my eyes, not out of sadness, but out of gratitude. Despite everything, we had survived. We had weathered the storm, and though we were both battered and bruised, we were still standing, together. As I leaned my head against Liam's shoulder, I realized something important. Marriages aren't perfect. They're messy, complicated, and sometimes they get tested in ways you never expect. But the true strength of a marriage isn't measured by how easy things are when everything is going well. It's measured by how you come together when everything falls apart. And while Jake may have tried to sabotage our marriage, he ultimately failed. Because in the end, love and the truth prevailed. Liam and I are still healing, and there are days when the past creeps in, reminding us of the betrayal we faced. But we've chosen to focus on the future. We've learned to communicate better, to prioritize each other's feelings, and most importantly, to trust again. It's not easy, but every day we grow a little stronger, a little more united. And as for Jake? He's no longer a part of our lives. His presence may have cast a dark shadow over our marriage for a time, but now, we've found our way back to the light. We've reclaimed our relationship, stronger and wiser than before. Because, in the end, love is worth fighting for, even when the odds are stacked against you.